Welcome to UPLEVEL, Real Health, Real Talk with Dr. Jenna Blasi. I'm Dr. Jenna. I spent years crafting ways to help women thrive, and I want to help you do the same. On this podcast, we dive deep into health at every level, focusing on the mind, the body, and the spirit. This is where real conversations meet transformational wellness. We'll be talking about all the things that truly matter, from nutrition and fitness to lifestyle, mindset, and personal development. Plus, the real deal on managing stress and navigating menopause. So if you're ready to elevate your health journey with authentic, transformative insights, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to the very first UPLEVEL podcast. I am so excited to be here and to launch this. It has been in the back of my mind for many, many years, and I've been learning more and more to act on things right away and move forward and go forward with them maybe before we even feel ready. So here we are, and we're going to have real talk and talk about health and what is health and what encompasses health and what does it look like. And I have transformed my health, my life, my mindset from the mentorship and education that I've received over the years. And so I really want to share that with you because I know that when we have our health, we are unstoppable. When we really have that freedom of our body, our minds, and then we can have that freedom in our life and go out and make the world a better place. So that's why I'm here. This is episode number 1. Thank you so much for joining me. And you might be wondering, how did I even get into this? Like, why am I so passionate about health? And I'll tell you that it started when I was in college. At least that's the first time I remember it. I mean, I grew up in a sort of normal family and I ate Doritos. And one of my first jobs in college was actually working at Frito-Lay factory, which is a whole nother story that I could talk about some other time if it fits into the context of anything. But I was in college and I was studying theater and I was in a play. And we did not have understudies. And so we were not allowed to get sick. And the director came around and he said, the show must go on. So if anybody gets sick, here's what you need to do. And he handed us a sheet of paper of things to do and not to do. Like, take extra vitamin C and take this and take that if you're not feeling well, and get extra sleep and don't eat a lot of sugar and et cetera. And so I thought to myself, if these changes will help me when I'm feeling sick, what effect might they have if I begin to implement them while I'm healthy? What control could I actually take over my health and well-being? And that's when I realized we have a huge amount of control. Before that, I don't believe I realized that. And so that's when I started making dietary changes and just really looking at how I could up-level my life to feel better and realize we have so much control over our own well-being. And so then I was living in Boulder, Colorado at the time. So I was studying with herbalists. I went to herbal school. I went to natural cooking school. I saw a naturopathic doctor, which is what turned me on to this type of medicine in the first place, because it was so comprehensive. And it really struck me of what it's like to go see a practitioner that's listening to you and that's taking in your whole history and what that looks like. And so that started me on this journey, and I was in the perfect place to be studying with all types of natural healers and things. And so I'm really passionate about this because I know that we can take control of our health and we can feel better. And most of us are just living at the status quo. And like maybe you have headaches every day and you're like, well, that's normal. Everybody has headaches. Or, oh, I have these symptoms in menopause, or I have PMS, or whatever it is, and we accept it. I'm on all these meds. We accept it as normal, but it's common, but not normal. And I started feeling better and better and better and realized how we could really, really thrive. And so I love to help take women from surviving and just getting by to really thriving and feeling amazing. So the kinds of things we're going to cover in this podcast are what goes into thriving, what goes into feeling really, really great. And so that's your nutrition, that's your environment, right? Both from a toxicity standpoint, as well as the people in your life and what our attitude is and what our job is. And so we're going to delve deep into health issues on all of the levels. And I'm really looking forward to covering some of these topics because there's a lot of missing information out there in the world, and there's a lot of incorrect information, right? A lot of people screaming from the rooftops, things that maybe are not true. So I will say my approach, I'm fairly research-based when it comes to if I'm going to tell you a supplement I like, or even a specific diet, I'm very research-based, but I'm also very intuitive. And I believe that we should be feeling empowered and we should be working with our higher selves to get where we want to go. And so that's why, like, when I work with people in my practice, we're a team. I'm not dictating to people. And so I want you to reclaim your power. That's a big one for me, is helping particularly women reestablish their trust in themselves and have true confidence and know and not always be looking to other people. So it's like you have information and have your mentors. I mean, mentors stretch us, they help us see our blind spots, but know your own power. Always listening to your own voice. And this is something I try to teach my kids as well. And funny side story, my son, when he was, I think he was like 2 or 3. So I try to teach my kids to, like, what does your higher guidance tell you? What is your deeper self tell you? And one time we were driving and in the back seat, he says, Mom, I think he was 2 or 3. He said, my higher guidance said that I should have a lollipop. And so we have to recognize our higher guidance versus our cravings and our emotional selves, right? But the reason that I'm so passionate about this is because when we're not encumbered by poor health, when we're not just in the daily struggle or the daily grind with the challenges that we have from various diseases or imbalances, whether in our mind, our body, or both, we can really be fully present and lead impactful lives. Lead impactful lives with our loved ones, with our friends, and that's what life is about. I mean, we're not here to be in a daily grind. We can get beyond that. And so we're going to dive into all types of topics on health. But today, what I was thinking we would cover as kind of a broader view are what I look at as the pillars of health. I used to talk on the Ayurvedic pillars of health, and those are slightly modifiable, and you'll hear them differently and see them differently if you look them up online. But basically looking at the fundamentals of health. When I would do these talks in Ayurveda, it was nutrition is what people will often say. So the 4 pillars. So imagine 4 pillars and there's a stool, and all 4 pillars are the legs of the stool, right? And so if you have 3 of those pillars, your stool is still a little wobbly. If you have 2 of those pillars, the stool or the chair probably will fall over. If you have 1 or none, if you have none, you're on the floor, right? If you have 1, you're falling over. And so the goal is not to overwhelm yourself and to say, oh my gosh, like I'm not sleeping, I'm not eating well, I'm not moving my body, and try to tackle all those at the same time. The goal is that you maybe look at, okay, what is my weakest pillar and how can I focus on that? And then when you've really established that pillar, you can move on to the next. But the mistake that I see a lot of people make in anything, any endeavor they embark upon, is I have to do all the things, right? People who aren't exercising regularly, for example, feel that I have to do an hour a day, 5 days a week. And so they end up doing nothing. Or meditation. I don't know how to meditate and I'm supposed to do it for half an hour. And so they don't do anything, rather than, well, why don't you start with a few minutes a day and get that into a habit and into a routine? And then you can build on that rather than being kind of paralyzed by overwhelm, which I know all too well. Historically, for me, if it's just too big of a task, I end up not doing anything. Think about when your house is like super messy or super unorganized. It's really hard to get going on it, at least for me. And whereas, like, if my house is clean, it's easier for me to keep up on it. It's easier for me to motivate to, like, oh, I just have this drawer to clean out, rather than when I Marie Kondoed my house. Kondo, was that her name? Marie Kondo, the tidy woman, and I did her exercise, and I put all my entire closet, all my dresser, all my clothes on the floor of my bedroom. I couldn't believe how many clothes I have. And it was completely overwhelming. But at that point, I'd committed to it because I couldn't even see my bed. There were literally clothes everywhere, because that's what she has you do, is really like take all your books or all your clothes or whatever you're working on. I recommend checking her out if you're not familiar with that. But it starts with commitment, right? So at that point, I was committed. I had to move through it, but it was also a bit overwhelming at how many things there were. And so we're going to have some separate podcasts on commitment and consistency and how can we establish these disciplines? How can we be really committed? because that's the key to success, right? If you eat well for a little while and then you stop, that's not as effective as eating well over the course of your life, but not trying to be perfect with it, right? For all you recovering, or well, I'm recovering, for all of you perfectionists out there, I'm an actively recovering perfectionist. It will paralyze us, the perfectionism, and it's a form of procrastination. So we have to make a commitment to what we really want. So actually, let me back up before I go into these pillars and ask you to think about, what do you really want? What do you really want? How do you really want to live? Because that is the starting point. When we know what we want, then we can actually make a decision, make a committed decision to going after it. And that's what keeps us going. And with motivation, for example, I've done some classes before on motivation, and people think there's like a magic wand, right? Someday I'm gonna be sprinkled with like fairy dust of the motivation, but motivation doesn't last. It's discipline. I don't always want to exercise, but I'm disciplined. It's a part of who I am now. It's harder not to than to do it, right? And so to get to the place with whichever one of these pillars is maybe a little weak for you, to get to the place where, let's say it's hard for you to exercise regularly, to get to the point where it's harder not to do than it is to do. Same with eating healthy, same with managing your stress. Like, to manage our stress, we have to carve out that time. We have to make the time and do the things we need to do to manage the stress. But if we don't, we're probably miserable. We're super stressed. We're running on fumes, or running on cortisol. And so to get to the place where it's like, oh my gosh, I need this in my life to actually be able to function and feel good. So the pillars, nutrition. I like to say nourishment. So I'm going to go through the pillars as an overview, and then I'll kind of break them down, but recognizing that we will probably in the future could spend a whole podcast episode, because they're only going to be 20 or 30 minutes. So I want you to have bite-sized pieces that you can actually get through. We can spend a whole podcast episode on each of these pillars, but I want to give an overview right now so you have a sense of what my approach is to health, to wellness, and what you can get out of this podcast, because my goal is that you get inspiration as well as tangible action steps of what you can do to start to transform your health and live your best life and thrive. Okay. So nourishment, that's nutrition, but it's also, how do we nourish ourselves? How do we feed our souls? Movement, and these are not in any particular order, but movement, sleep, and what is sometimes called sacred space, or meditation, or stress management, or I would kind of include mindset. That fourth pillar could go in a few different focuses. So if we look at the first pillar of nutrition or nourishment, again, I like nourishment because it encompasses nutrition. When we look at nourishment, we can break this into two categories or two branches. One is, how are we nourishing ourselves? How many of you are experiencing joy every day of your lives? Because it's really important. And I know people, they don't even know what brings them joy anymore. They're so far off track. They're just in the grind of life. You're in survival mode, right? You're in fight or flight. What is joy? And so I'm going to give you an action step for joy. And what I want you all to do is just pick one of these pillars that you feel is either the weakest and needs the most nourishment, so to speak, or which one resonates with you. You're like, I would love to have that pillar dialed in, which probably is also your weakest one, right? So nourishment, we're going to break into two categories. So nourishment, how are you nourishing your being, right? Even there's studies on kids with ADD and ADHD. They go out in nature, and it is super effective, right? It nourishes them in a way they're not even aware of. And it's rivaled medications in many cases. And so what nourishes you? So I encourage you, if you're not sure, or if you're not sure what brings you joy, make a list. And what I tell people is just like brainstorm the list of all the things, right? All the things. And then you're going to break up that list into things you can do or would do yearly, right? Like maybe a retreat, a spa retreat or something like that nourishes you, but you would only do that once a year or twice a year or something like that. And then break it into, maybe things you would do quarterly, or things you would do monthly, things you would do weekly, Like maybe lunch with friends you would do weekly, or a massage you would do weekly, but you wouldn't necessarily do those daily. Maybe you would. Again, you figure out for you what are yearly, what are biannually or quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily. Make sure you've got things on that list that are daily, all right? So that every day doesn't have to be a huge time commitment. Might be 5 minutes, might be 10 minutes. You're doing something that nourishes your soul. You're getting up and getting out into nature, or you're putting on music that just makes you feel better. For me, I'll just hop on my rebounder, gives me a little reset, which is a mini trampoline for those of you that don't know what it is. Listening to a comedian that you think is funny, whatever it is. So you're going to make a list, you're going to break it into categories, and then put it on your calendar. Put it on your calendar. Bob Proctor, he used to say, if you want to know what's important to you, look at your calendar and look at your checkbook. If it's not on the calendar, it's not important. So if you're like, oh, my family's so important to me, and I pull up your calendar and they're not on there, where's date night with your significant other? Where's special time with your kids? If it's not on there, are they really important to you? So I want you to put it on there. The other piece of the nourishment pillar is nutrition, how we nourish our bodies with food, with drink. Okay, so again, I'm not going to go into the details of what that looks like. We will have future podcasts on nutrition and the fad diets out there, and how they're not where it's at, and restriction is not where it's at, but balance. 80-20, right? 80% what's good for you, maybe 20% or 10% leeway, depending on, like, if you have a chronic health condition, you might need to be a little smaller in that percentage where you deviate. It varies person to person. So that's the first pillar. Another pillar, or second pillar, is movement. Movement is life, right? There's that old saying about trees that can't bend, that don't have flexibility, break, right? We need to move our bodies, but we don't need to move them in a way that's not sustainable. We don't need to move them in a way that feels like torture to ourselves. Although, we have to be willing to get a little bit uncomfortable. I taught fitness classes for years, and a lot of the women who would come to my classes would tell me, oh, I'm doing, 3, 4, 5 classes a day, but my body's not changing. Well, your body's not changing because you're probably staying within your comfort zone, and you're better off doing less and really pushing and getting out of your comfort zone. You're going to get much better gains from that. And so that will be a theme that you will see in many things I'll talk about, is getting outside of our comfort zone. It is so important. We don't grow and transform when we're comfortable, right? If your personal trainer says, give me 2 more squats, that's where the magic is. And if you're like, nah, it's too hard, I don't want to do it, you're not going to get to that next level. So we have to start being comfortable, being uncomfortable. And that's what this podcast was for me. I was like, oh, someday I'll do a podcast. Oh, someday, maybe someday. Or I even had the thought, I'll just be on other people's podcasts. And then, I was at a Elevate Excellence event with my mentor, and he was talking to somebody else about doing a podcast, and I thought, oh my gosh, I have to do this. And I wrote it down. And at first I was like going to do it. Oh, I'll do it, next year, in the new year. How many of you are waiting to start your lives? And then after I wrote that, I knew it wasn't right. I was like, you were just putting this off. You got to just jump in and do it. So let's get comfortable being uncomfortable. Okay, so movement. Again, we'll do a whole future podcast on movement. I just want to give you a brief overview. The third pillar is sleep. We'll do a whole podcast on sleep, because lots of you are not sleeping. And if you're perimenopausal or menopausal, your sleep gets disrupted. And so if we don't sleep, that affects how we eat, that affects how we move, right? It affects our stress and our stress hormones. And so sleep is so important, but how we eat and how we move also affects our sleep. And so start looking at, the sleep pillar, and just sleep hygiene. What's your routine before bed? Do you need to get off screens for a little bit before bed? Do you need to reset? Do you need to do some, take a warm bath? Like, what can you do to really reset your sleep so that you're making good food choices the next day, or healthy choices? I would say, I don't love to put judgments on like good and bad. Food just is, right? But healthier choices, and that you have energy for your day, and patience, right? So when we don't sleep, we're tired. We have kids, we get irritable with our kids, and that doesn't feel good. Fourth pillar, sacred space, or meditation, or stress management. I can kind of lump mindset into this, but I feel like mindset is also a whole separate topic of how we view the world, how we perceive the world, how we walk through the world, and what our philosophy and standards are around mindset. But so let's kind of simplify it down for now to being like, for me, sacred space, it's not a place. I mean, it can be. You can have a place in your house that's set aside for meditation, for prayer, for sacred space, but it's, for me, it's an act. It is connecting with source. All right. So it's quieting them. It is time daily. These pillars are daily, by the way. You know, if you don't sleep one day, you probably feel it. I mean, if you're in your 20s, you may be able to get away with it, but the older we get, the less that we can get away with not sleeping well. If you don't eat well, you usually feel it, within a day. If we don't move our bodies, unless it's a rest and recovery day, if you're used to moving your body, you will feel it. And even if you're not exercising regularly, if you sit on the couch all day, you're going to be stiff, right? So we need these pillars every day. So this fourth pillar of sacred space or stress management, to me, it's connection with self, with source, with higher self. And so it's a quieting of the mind and connecting with that higher version of ourselves, with spirit. And really tapping in again to that place where we are infinite, that place where everything is okay. And so for some people that this is a prayer practice, for other people this is meditation. For some people it might just be breathing and quieting the mind, but it is a very important practice. And we have more and more studies on this, right? Showing the benefits of meditation, showing the benefits on the brain, on the nervous system, and on physical symptoms of how we can transform our physical bodies through the work that we do with the subconscious and with the conscious and subconscious mind, getting to the subconscious through our subconscious. So quieting those thoughts. And then from a mindset standpoint, which I said I'm not going to go into quite today, planting the seeds that we want so we can actually start to magnetize and create what we want in our lives. So every day having some sort of practice. Again, I could do a whole episode on this because there's different techniques, there's different ways, and different things work for different people. I can tell you when I was in college, I didn't sleep well. And so I wanted to do meditation and I had no idea how to do it. And so I made up what I called a happy place meditation. And so I would picture myself someplace that I felt really relaxed. So for me, it was on the ocean, on a raft, and I could feel the waves and I could feel the sun. And I had body image issues at that time. So in this visualization that I made up, I loved my body. I was comfortable. I was happy. And I tuned into all of the feelings of being relaxed, of loving myself, of feeling really good. And I would do that for 15 minutes in the morning to start my day. I just sort of arbitrarily made it up. And I would do it for 15 minutes before bed, because you could do your sacred space activities or your stress management activities at the beginning of your day. You could at night, especially if you have sleep issues, I recommend them at night. You can bookend your day, which is what I was doing. But if you live in a really stressful or work in a really stressful environment, you should implement something throughout the day. Anyway, I started sleeping. It calmed me down and I started sleeping. And I will tell you that my boyfriend at the time, if I didn't do my morning meditation, he could tell. He would say, "You skipped your morning meditation this morning, didn't you?" And because I was really much more irritable with him if I hadn't done it. And so, we were not ultimately meant to be, but I was much less triggered and much more pleasant to be around when I had done my morning practice. And so these pillars are crucial. So take a look at, what do you really want? How do you want to live? What do you want your life to look like? Stop dreaming small, stop playing small, stop accepting all of these things that are common but not normal. We can feel great. Every decade for the last, I mean, gosh, probably always, I would say, I feel better every decade because I'm learning more, I'm implementing more, I'm going deeper into this. And like I said, I have worked so closely with amazing mentorships, and that strengthens us when we have the right mentorship. And so I hope you feel that come through in this podcast. And so look at, what do I really want? These are your action steps. These are your takeaways, okay, from our first podcast here as we wrap up. What do I really want? Write out a vision. We can maybe do a whole podcast if you all want on vision. What do I want? What does it look like? Feel into that. And then let's just start with some of these pillars. Where could you start? Is it the diet and the nourishment, the joy piece that you want to dial in a little bit? Is it getting movement as part of your regular life? And then start small. Like, don't commit to CrossFit 6 days a week for an hour. Go, what am I willing to commit to? And let me get started and start to implement that. And or is it sleep? So where can you start looking at sleep? And some of the sleep issues will be working with medical professionals to help you figure out what's going on. And some of it is just sleep hygiene, meaning what's your routine? Are you working right up until bedtime, etc.? And then this fourth pillar, which probably we all could strengthen. I know this is a really important pillar for me. It's definitely how I start and end every day, is this sacred space, meditation, focused on, and I got distracted there for a moment because I was thinking these pillars go together, right? Like nourishment could be your sacred space. Sacred space might bring you joy, right? I work on my personal development, my mindset every day, but that is separate from my meditation practice. So there is an overlap because meditation will help you go to sleep, right? The right foods will help you focus your brain. So there is some overlap, but you can definitely separate them out into the pillars that you feel maybe need the most attention, and just start with that one and start small within it if you need to. Go big with your vision, go big with where you want to go, but let's set ourselves up for success, right? Where you're not like diving into the deep end and then after a month you're not doing anything anymore. Let's establish routines so you can really, really succeed and then build on those practices. And so in future episodes, I will go deep into all these areas of health. Like I said, we can go deep into sleep, nutrition, nourishment, and joy as a separate topic, meditation techniques, stress management techniques, which are different, right? I feel like meditation is a stress management technique, but there's obviously other techniques. Going deep into mindset. I'm huge on mindset. My program members, we do comprehensive wellness programs in my practice, and my program members know, like, that's a cheat code to me, because if we don't retrain our brains and really dial in our mindset, we'll get results, but they won't we may not get results because we can't outperform our self-image, or we get results for a little while and then our body resets. And how many of you have been on that roller coaster? So my goal with you all is to get you off the roller coaster of life is up and down. I mean, the outside things will always be up and down, but we can remain calm in the center. We can learn to not have these crazy highs and lows, but to really go through life where we feel fulfilled and we feel joyful and we wake up and we're excited about a new day instead of feeling like we're dragging through a new day. So we'll also go into labs, because I feel like a lot of you are probably wondering, like, I'm exhausted. What are some labs I can run? Because look, you're going to be exhausted if you're not sleeping. You're going to be exhausted if you're not eating well. You're going to be exhausted if you're in a job that you don't like. But there's also physiological things going on. So we're going to talk about labs. We can talk about hormone therapy, because I've done a whole fellowship and in menopause. So there's so many amazing things, but we're going to come at it from all aspects: the physical health, the mental health, the emotional health, and labs to run, ways to find the right mentors, ways to bring all of these things together so that you can live your best life. Okay, that is my purpose. So we're going to have episodes weekly, and it'll be 20 to 30 minutes. And I know I'm coming up on the end of that right now. And you will benefit because you'll learn so much, get clarity, because there's a lot of confusion out there about supplements and labs and what's the right type of diet. So you'll get clarity on all that, as well as, I hope, inspiration and action steps to really start moving the needle on all these things. So you can release weight, feel good in your body, be energized, sleep well, be joyful, and bring your best self to the world. Because I believe that when we have our health, we can live our purpose. I couldn't do what I'm doing if I didn't have my health. When we have our health, we can live our purpose. And every one of you that gets your health back and goes out and lives your purpose, you're making the world a better place. And then we can shine light. And the only way to change darkness is to shine light on it, not bring more darkness. And so let's light you up, get you thriving, get you sparkling again. And I'm just really excited to be on this journey with you. And I look forward to talking with you again next week. Thanks so much, everyone. Thank you for joining me on this episode of UPLEVEL, Real Health, Real Talk. I hope today's conversation inspired you to take the next step in your health journey, one that nourishes not just your body, but your mind and spirit as well. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you found value in today's episode, please leave a review. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep thriving. And remember, true wellness is a journey, and you are on the right path.